Imagine you get an email from a pro-Trump fundraising group. It says, donate to this committee and you will receive the president's private national security briefings. Not a summary, not a newsletter, it's actual classified briefings. The same one the CIA director prepares. That email is real. A senator held it up in Congress in March 2026 during a live Senate hearing, and he asked the director of national intelligence directly, should donors be able to pay for access of these briefings? The answer she gave was not a denial. She said she didn't know what the document was. We are going to walk through exactly what's happening in that hearing, why it matters, and what it tells us about how intelligence works or doesn't work inside the current White House. In March 2026, the Senate Intelligence Committee held what is called the annual Worldwide Threats hearing. This is a regular event where the nation's top intelligence officials sit before senators and answer questions about global security. Things like nuclear threat, foreign, military activity, cyber attacks. This year, the hearing had extra weight. Just weeks before the United States was launching military strikes against Iran, the war was still going. The Strait of HORMUZ, one of the most important waterways in the world, responsible for roughly 20% of global oil traffic, had been closed off by Iranian forces as a response to those strikes. Gulf states, some of them US allies, were reportedly hit by Iranian attacks. So, Senator had two very specific questions going into this hearing. First, did anyone warn Trump that striking Iran could lead to exactly this outcome? And second, did he listen? The official who testified here, TULSI GABBARD, Director of National Intelligence, and John Rockflynn, Director of the CIA. 3 hours of testimony, and by the end, neither question had been answered clearly. Let's start with GABBARD, because her situation at this hearing was particularly strange. A year earlier, in front of the same Senate committee, she had publicly said that Iran's nuclear weapons program did not pose a serious near-term threat to the United States. That was her stated view. Trump, sitting in the White House, responded by saying publicly that she was wrong. Then came the war with Iran, a war that GABBARD, based on her entire public records, had never supported. She had spent years arguing against exactly this kind of military intervention, but once it started, she went almost completely quiet. The only real statement she made was after a man named Joe Kent, the head of the National Counter-Terrorism Center, resigned from his position. Kent said in his resignation that he could not support the Iran war because, based on the intelligence he had seen, Iran did not present an imminent threat of the United States. When GABBARD finally responds to that, she did not say Kent was wrong about the intelligence. She said Trump was the authority to decide what counts as an imminent threat, and that he made his decision based on intelligence her officials provided. That is a careful, narrow statement. She did not say she personally believed the intelligence showed an imminent threat. Senator noticed that. The White House's official reason for starting the war with Iran was that Iran posed an imminent nuclear threat. Senator John Ossoff pressed GABBARD on this directly. He asked the yes or no questions. Did the intelligence community assess that Iran posed an imminent nuclear threat? GABBARD responds, it is not the intelligence community responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat. Ossoff pushed it back immediately. He said, and this is accurate, that is literally the intelligence community's jobs. The entire purpose of the Worldwide Threats hearing is for intelligence officials to provide what are called timely, objective, and independent assignments to elected representatives. GABBARD was in that moment refusing to do the thing she was sitting in that room to do. Also worth noting, in her own opening statement at the same hearing, GABBARD cited a defense intelligence agency report saying Iran could not build a viable long-range missile capable of reaching the United States before the year 2035. She mentioned that herself, and they refused to say whether Iran was an imminent threat. The second major question of this hearing was about the Strait of HORMUZ. After Iran blocked it, Trump said publicly multiple times that nobody predicted this would happen. He said, and I'm quoting here, nobody, no, the greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit the Gulf states. Senator wanted to know Is that true? Or did intelligence agencies warn the president and he just didn't act on it? Senator Ron Wyden asked GABBARD directly, did intelligence agency assets, before the war started, that Iran had the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz in response to US attack? Her answer was essentially this intelligence community was continue to provide the president with intelligence related to this operation. That is not an answer to the question. Senator Angus King pointed out that anyone who looks at the map can see how vulnerable the Strait of Hormuz is. He asked whether that part of the briefing the president recited. Ratcliffe was slightly more direct. He said the president recites briefings constantly. He also acknowledged that the intelligence community had locked assets Iran would likely use the strait as a pressure point. But whether that was communicated to Trump before the strikes, that part was never confirmed. Both GABBARD and Redfile then claimed they were not aware that Trump had been making public statements saying nobody predicted this outcome. Senators found that very hard to believe, given that Trump had been saying it repeatedly for days. Now we get to the part that closes out the hearing, and arguably the most striking moment of the whole thing. Senator Mark Kelly held up a fundraising email sent out by a pro-Trump committee. The email had multiple links to donate money, and in it, there was a line that said, as a national security briefing member, you recite my private national security briefings. Kelly read it directly to GABBARD and Richfield and asked, do you think members of the public should be able to pay money and receive president private national security briefings? Redfile responds, he said he didn't know what that document was, but that whatever it said, it didn't happen. GABBARD said, she was also unfamiliar with the email. To be clear, neither of them said the idea was wrong. Neither of them said absolutely not. That will be illegal. That will be a serious breach of national security. They both said they didn't know about it. The email is safe was real. The question of whether donors actually receive briefings or whether this was misleading fundraising language was not answered during the hearing. Here is where things stand as on March 2026. The United States is in the middle of the war with Iran that was justified by an imminent threat the intelligence community apparently did not confirm in those terms. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, disrupting global oil supply. US allies in the Gulf were attacked. Trump was publicly claimed no one predicted any of this would happen. He's one intelligence official under what before the Senate will not confirm whether he has worked. And separately, a fundraising email connected to Trump political operation told donors they could pay for access to his private national security briefings. Every one of these things is documented. Every one of them came out in a single 3-hour Senate hearing. The intelligence community's job is to give the president accurate, honest information. The president's job is to make decisions based on that information. The Senate jobs and really the public's jobs through representative is to hold both of these things accountable. Based on what he saw in March 2026, at least one and possibly both of those first two functions appear to be broken. So here is what I want to ask you. If a fundraising email can promise donors access to the classified briefings and the country top intelligence official responds by saying she just doesn't know what the email is, what does that tell you about who is actually running US national security right now? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this kind of breakdowns is something you want to keep following, subscribe. I cover these topics as this develops, and there is a lot more still developing.